Welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast, the photo imaging industry's leading news source. Here's your host, Gary Peugeot. The Dead Pixel Society podcast is brought to you by Media Clip, Advertech Printing, and Independent Photo Imagers.
Hello again, and welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. I'm your host, Gary Peugeot, and today we're joined by Brenda Neckvatal, who's a human results professional coming to us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Brenda. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, good. That was kind of a long-winded introduction to say that you are a professional who gets results out of humans. Is that how
That's right.
All right.
That's right.
So how did you get started in that business?
So I actually come from a 30-year plus tenured HR background, mostly existing in and actually working in high-performing teams. I've had the fortune and the privilege of working for 6 Fortune 500 companies at a wide variety of different levels throughout my entire career. So I've seen it done. I've been part of it. And now I get to take what I know and what I learned and actually help businesses figure out that people puzzle.
Which is a very complex puzzle these days, which I do want to get into. But when you talk about human results, what does that mean? Because, you hear these phrases. I read a lot of business books, and I'm sure you do too. You read the articles, the blogs, all that, performance and KPIs and all these things people do. What's your definition so we know what you and I are going to be talking about?
Performance is a wide range. It can be just break down to the very basic expectations all the way up to, being your absolute superstar. But even within that scale, you still have to have multiple people working with different individuals being cohesive together.
Sure.
And so if one person is struggling in a particular area that starts pulling cohesion apart, then unless it's caught in a timely manner, then what happens is that drag, it's like an elastic band, right? It's like a rubber band. It keeps stretching until something happens and it comes back together again. But eventually what happens is that stretch goes to the point where it's overstretched. So when you're talking about human results, we're talking about catching it early. What can you do to reverse it? We're looking at working with difficult people. We're looking at, even people who are your steady eddies and your most stable, high performing, like everybody at some point in time misses the mark. And so what does that mean? What happens when you have to deal with a really difficult personality? And that's where I get my phone call. So it's like when my little Hey Brenda hotline starts ringing, it always when I answer it, it's always like, I got a guy or I have a woman that I'm working with. Like it always starts that way. Always. So yeah, my little Hey Brenda hotline, that's when that thing starts going off, then I know I'm actually dealing with something beyond what their comfort level is or beyond what they know how to handle, when in fact they do know how to handle it, but they don't have clarity. They may not have the confidence to do so. And all they're looking to do is get that cohesion back in place and make sure that that rubber band isn't stretching anymore. It's actually snapping back to where it needs to be.
So you've used that word a couple times, cohesion. Is that the goal? Is that sort of where you think like a harmonious workplace is actually a better performing workplace?
Ideally, yeah. I mean, when, and here's the thing, even within cohesion, you can still have conflict that is highly effective.
Right.
So you can have people who are respective of one another sit there and say, I hear what you're saying, but I disagree.
Right.
And the other person, instead of it going like the ego coming right up and going, wait a minute, I'm stepping in, right? Then now you've got somebody that's willing to talk and say, okay, let's hear what you've got to say about this. Help me understand why you don't agree with that.
So a lot of times, you've got different areas where people are interacting with, people brought into a team, right? Let's say you have an existing team, and then, hey, we need another person, and then HR goes out and finds them and then brings them in. And, but then HR doesn't deal with that person, right? So how can they improve that process of bringing someone into a team or creating a team from the onset that will hopefully improve the cohesion as opposed to, hey, we need to fill a role. Here's a body.
Well, to be honest with you, it doesn't start and finish in HR. Team cohesion will always start and end with the value structure of the organization.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. One of my mentors, and this is a life mentor of mine, everything that he does, from leading his own family to leading multiple businesses to leading all of his coaches to leading, like, he operates on a series of core values. Now, when I've worked for these Fortune 500 companies, there were two very specific companies that were masters at doing exactly what my life mentor does, and that is operating an organization solely based on core values. And so when you've got core values working for you, what's going to happen is that you're going to find alignment. And alignment is like one of the biggest stepping stones to cohesion. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by core values. And I'll use one of his core values. Everything that I do is, all my decisions are based off of my core values. Now, my core values are not structured like his, but I love how he does it. So that's why I want to use his.
Sure.
So his number one core value that exists at the top of everything is never let good be the robber of great. It's just a magnificent one, right? It means that good is not enough in our organization. Take 1% step more.
Right.
They're just asking for one, not 12, not 52, 1% greater, right? So never let great rob you of your existence and your experience of greatness, right? That's the thing. Now, if you have somebody that thinks that that's a load of crap,
right. Yeah.
Which you're gonna have employees that come in and they're like, what?
Yeah. That's good enough. We can do that. We don't need to.
Yeah. You don't maybe necessarily have misalignment, but you definitely don't have that cohesion. People are not walking the same path. Now, they may live that way. They just may not think that way.
Right.
But the thing is that when it comes to bringing the right people in, your thoughts are actually going to dictate your actions moving forward. So if you're looking at somebody through a critical lens, you're always going to see somebody through a critical lens.
Sure.
And that was my experience. It was my experience throughout the vast majority of my career. I had managers who were looking at me constantly in a critical way. And in their eyes, I was never going to step up and excel, even though I was constantly working on myself each and every single day. And the only way I got out of that situation was literally to leave.
Right.
So I had some opportunity, but it wasn't facilitated as a ceiling to getting myself up, right? So leaders think when they look at people in that way, they think it's like, I'm controlling the situation, I'm controlling the environment, I'm actually keeping the right people in the right job, when in fact, what they're doing is they're actually stretching that rubber band without really even realizing it. Right. And ultimately what they're going to get is they're going to get people that look at that core value and go, what the hell are they thinking? Because they're not living up to it.
Right.
And it's a massive, massive aha thing that comes out when people realize that they're doing that, when in fact they should be doing something else. They should actually be leveraging employee assets daily. They should be maximizing it and literally allowing everybody who wants to thrive and succeed a full runway to do that, albeit guided, right? Don't let them go all laissez-faire on you. But, there's just so many different things. So when we look at the theory of human results, like what I talk about, is that we're looking at what are you doing to actually maximize that ability to lead your people, leverage employee assets daily, right? Lead, L-E-A-D. What are you doing to make that happen? And how are we eliminating these little road bumps and the things that are getting in, the obstacles that are popping up for you? And I promise you, I've been down this road myself. I've gone through all of this critical work that I can tell you 9 times out of 10, they're self-imposed.
So, I've had a few guests on in the past who have talked about, core values and things, but a lot of times, when I talk to my audience, they're like, well, I'm just trying to, get the store open every day and turn on the printer and everything, right? They got the day-to-day fires to put out, and sometimes it's hard to deal with, the promise of a core value, right? Which may be in the Pavlov's hierarchy of needs, it's way up there into self-actualization, whereas, down below, it's like, I gotta, my printer didn't show up this morning, right? That's the day-to-day need. So obviously stuff happens. How do you recommend to somebody who is let's say they got 20, 30, 40 employees, right? They're not a Fortune 500 company, but it's a decent sized business. Staying on that focus of reminding themselves their core values, because you can get dragged down into the day to day and lose sight of it
Well,
or make
that's the thing is that,
compromises.
yeah, and that's the thing is that those core values really are something that should be alive. And I'll give you a really simple example of it.
Mhm.
So you've heard of Patrick Lencioni's Five Dysfunctions of a Team, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
When you look at that period, what is that foundation, that very, very bottom first rung on that period?
Well, it's been a while since I read the book, so if you may want to share what you're looking
So the very foundation
Mhm.
of a functioning team and even a dysfunctioning team is based off of the value of trust.
Mhm. Okay.
Period. So you gave me a really great example. It's like they're into the day to day, right? The owners show up at work and their printer doesn't show up. It's like, well, that trust now has been eroded,
Right.
right? And here's the secret about trust.
Mhm.
Trust builds like raindrops in a bucket,
Mhm.
like almost like trust drops, right?
Right.
And so that bucket, if it is tipped over because somebody doesn't come in when they know that they're supposed to,
Right.
or they're not coming in on a regular basis, that foundation, that value of trust, that starts to get knocked down,
Mhm.
right? And that does eat at the heart and soul of a business owner, because I'm telling you right now, other than your own kids, your dog and your cat and your horse or whatever valued pet that you have, there's nothing that you put more energy into other than your own business.
Right.
Really, right? So you're living your core values whether you realize it or not.
Mhm.
Even if you don't even articulate them,
Mhm.
you're still living them. And more often than not, somebody's core value is going to hit that trust,
Mhm.
right? Trust is nothing else is going to happen unless you have trust,
Right.
period. Right? So if you're working at building trust, then you're essentially living within the construct of your core value. I trust that you're going to be here. I trust that you're going to get the job done. I'm going to trust that you're not taking money out of the cash register.
Mhm.
I'm also trusting that you're not stealing my customers and my business from me, because you now have a peek behind the scenes, right?
Mhm.
Trust, it's an absolute core value.
But part of that obligation, though, is the fact that the owner themselves has to live up to that, right?
Absolutely.
That's the thing is, when you hear the stories of, the kids today don't want to work or whatever, is that because people don't want to work, or is it because you're hiring badly, or you're not modeling the behavior that you want your own employees to have?
It's a combination in today's world of all three.
Mhm.
We do not have people in this world right now that have the kind of skill set that we had 30, 40 years ago. For those of you who don't know, like we were joking around earlier and he was asking me about, like how comfortable you are. I told him, I said, I'm a one take Osmond, right? If you've grown up in our era, you understand that Donnie and Marie Osmond did everything by one take, just like the Jacksons did, right? They had to do everything by one take. That was the expectation of their household. If they didn't, there were sharp consequences to that. All that surfaced later on in life. But that was also a work value that we were taught growing up. We didn't have remotely close to anything that people have in today's work environment. We had bosses.
Mhm.
We absolutely had bosses. And our bosses, when they taught us how to work, they said, this is what you're going to do. You're going to do it time and time again. And if you don't like it, there's the door. Don't let it hit you in the ass on the way out.
Right.
Right. In today's world, we don't have that anymore. So there is a lack of a better word, discipline that's going on. We were disciplined into doing our job.
Mhm.
We had high expectations with high consequences that came with that. Now, I'm not saying that that doesn't exist in today, but our culture has shifted.
Mhm.
Our culture in world history has consistently shifted over
Sure.
the decades and the eons, right? This is just our next iteration of it. So it gives us more challenges to find people, but ultimately those individuals likely don't have that, because that's just not how the world is in today.
Right.
But are they trainable?
Mhm. Sure.
Yeah, they are. Can you set those expectations with high consequences and teach people that you come in, hey, this is how we do things.
Mhm.
This is what I expect.
Right.
I'm going to follow up with you on this to make sure that you're doing it. And if you're not, you know what, we're going to help you get back on track. If you still aren't doing it, the conversation is going to be a little bit different.
Mhm.
And then we're going to give you the choice. Do you really want to be here or not?
Right.
Right. You'll be amazed at how many people will actually take that and go, you know what? Nobody's ever actually talked to me that way before.
Right.
and treated me like an adult. And not everybody is going to embrace that. And the goal will always be is finding the people in place to actually do the job that you need them to do.
Mhm.
And are they going to do it within the core value structure that you got?
That I think is the first reference to Donnie Marie Osmond on this podcast. So, so you win on that one. Because I think there is some sort of, especially in our industry, right? Because a lot of
Mhm.
the people who run the photo labs and the camera stores and whatnot are,
Yeah.
people, middle-aged and higher in many
Yep.
cases, right? So they may not have the patience, I think, is what you're talking about, to actually have to grow some of the skills of some of the folks. Because you say, I mean, they are trainable. They want to work because obviously they've applied to a job. Maybe they weren't doing a paper route when they were 14, like a lot of people were,
Yeah.
or doing babysitting jobs or whatever, where you kind of get your first taste of consequences, right? If I don't deliver the papers, I don't get paid, right?
Yep.
What is some advice you have for somebody who's kind of in that space where you're looking at, let's say you do have the core value piece, right, and you are doing that, but you have to communicate that consistently.
You nailed it right on the head. That's exactly where I was going to go. It's the communication piece of it.
Mhm.
And there's three things that I teach people how to effectively communicate. All right. It's either when you're dealing with a crisis, when you're, talking about an expectation, when somebody's made a mistake and you need to figure out what's going on, when you've got two people that are just like banging heads. It's the same process for everything. The first one is that you have to listen more and talk less.
Mhm.
And the reason why I say that is because you're going to learn a lot.
Mhm.
You're going to learn a lot more than always being the one. I'm going to tell you right now, people who are constantly the leaders are the ones who are always talking,
Mhm.
their words are being swept away by the wind.
Mhm.
Listening actually draws forward the information that you need in order to keep people. It's like a soccer game, right? Keep that ball out on the field. And then when your players going out of bounds, you get them back in again just by
Right.
doing it that way. Okay. The next thing is that when you ask questions, ask good questions and you're going to get good information back.
Mhm.
Ask good questions, you're going to get good answers. If you ask bad questions, you're not going to get what you want. Right.
Mhm.
And asking good questions doesn't necessarily mean that you always know the answer to them. But what it does is it actually facilitates people bringing you the information that you need in order to work through the situation, not fix it,
Mhm.
work through it.
Mhm.
Right. And then lastly, the power of your leadership, where you are going to reign supreme,
Mhm.
will always lie in your follow up.
Mhm.
And follow up isn't just checking to make sure somebody's doing something. Follow up is also if the person has self corrected or corrected because of your guidance, that acknowledgement is like, hey, that is exactly what I wanted you to do. Thank you so much. Way to go. Keep doing it. That's perfect. What you did was perfect.
Mhm.
And you should feel really good about that. Right? That's follow up.
Mhm.
And if you do those three things consistently,
Right.
then you're always going to have people problems. You're always going to have process
Right.
problems. Always. All right.
It's a
But
given.
you can't, and it's really funny because years ago when I first started, I was screwing something up. In my head, I'm like, okay, I fixed this problem because I'm a problem fixer, right? I went and I fixed this problem, had the conversation with the person, boom, done. Not going to happen again, right? When in fact, what I should have been doing is realizing is that I'm going to have this conversation. I'm going to reset the expectation. Today's a new day. And then you know what? We're going to check with them tomorrow to make sure that what I put into place sticks,
Right.
right? And I don't really have to do anything more beyond that because if it's sticking, then it's working, then problem solved.
Right.
If it's not sticking, that means I got a bigger problem. And now I've done so much footwork already that addressing the problem moving forward eventually will come down to choice. You either want to be here and play the game or you don't. That's fine. Whatever you want to do. Congratulations. We love you. Go on. Find your happiness somewhere else. Right.
Mhm. So one of the challenges you kind of hit on there though is today's hiring environment. I think some people always say, at least this person's here. They may be a problem in my lab or in my store. At least they're here, and they don't want to deal with that problem of maybe having to invite someone to apply somewhere else, as they say.
Yeah.
When is the point when you have to make that decision? Because I think in most cases, when you get to that point, it shouldn't be a surprise. That person should know they're on a path, right,
Yeah.
of non-performance, right? So, but when do you start having those conversations?
Early and often. Yeah. And you know what a lot of people do is that I see, and this is when the Brenda Hay, the Hay hotline starts working, right? Is that they have now allowed the behavior to go on for a long time. And I'll be honest with you, back in the early 2000s, the vast majority of questions on my Hey Brenda hotline that would come up were mostly, it's like, well, he's got a bad attitude and I want the attitude to change. And I'm like, why are you focusing on attitude? Because you can't change that.
Right.
What it's even, trust me, and if you don't believe me, just tell a screaming 4-year-old that they have a bad attitude and watch the magic happen, right?
Right.
Watch the meteors fall from the sky. But when you focus on somebody's behavior,
Right.
in today's world, yeah, we've got still attitude stuff, but really what more people are like they're dialing in on behavior, like they don't want to be here, they don't want to work, they don't want to. Part of it, I'm going to be totally honest with you, part of it is that our frontline employees, the people that are steady eddies, the people that we need boots on the ground all the time, being client facing, they are conditioned for a couple of things. Number one, the cell phone has replaced pretty much every appliance in the world except your refrigerator and your oven. But what it's also done is it is also taught them that there is such a thing as instant gratification.
Right.
And that is not real.
Right.
Right. So there's that. That's a challenge. And then the other thing is that they also are learning that everybody can have a side hustle, and every side hustle will make you a grandiose millionaire.
Right.
That also is not the case too. So in my opinion, this generation is going to have to shake that off. They're going to have to learn those hard lessons. They're going to have to go through. The sad part of it is that they're going to be 10, 15 years behind in the skill gap.
Right.
Compared to people that go, I'm putting my damn phone down. I'm focusing in on what I need to do here right now and not falling victim to the instant gratification.
Mm-hmm.
That is kind of part of this generation, this rising generation of employees.
Mm-hmm.
By the time they get to be 35, 40 years old, they're going to realize that is not the case.
Right.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those are the lessons that they're going to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Every generation has them.
Right.
So with that being said, it means that you have to know what kind of employee you want in place. And I'm sure you've heard it at some point in time. But if you ever sit down and actually write a list of the things that you want out of your life, why can't you do that with your spouse? Why can't you do that with your best friends? Or what kind of friendships you want? Why can't you do that with your employees?
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I strongly encourage people to actually create an employee avatar.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This is what I want my employees to look like. Because when you think a certain way, you are in fact affecting your future. It's almost like calling it into existence. But just because you write it down, just you're clear on it, doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. Those things do happen. They are the exception and not the rule.
Mm-hmm.
But you at least now know it. Look, hiring and dating, they're so similar. Right? They really are. And when you're talking to somebody and you're asking them questions that help you understand how they're going to behave through something, and you see them again, when you talk, listen more and talk less, you're actually learning because they're telling you everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then they're also telling the things that they're not willing to tell you. They're saying what they're not wanting to say. You pick up on those things, right? You get a sense. It's like, okay, so I think I can work with this person over the next 6 to 9 months. I think I can get them to where I need them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to commit to it.
Mm-hmm.
You absolutely have to commit to it, right? If you don't commit to it and you just let them flap like a flag in the wind, that's all you're going to get. You're going to get a tattered piece of cloth.
Mm-hmm.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Join Dr. Bill Howitt in his new podcast dedicated to empowering employers with the knowledge and tools to protect and promote mental health in the workplace. The Exploring Workplace Mental Health show considers issues relating to capacity building. Tune in as Dr. Bill delves into the why, what, and how of fostering a mentally healthy work environment. Each episode provides employers and decision makers with actionable insights and strategies to create a supportive culture that empowers employees. Subscribe to the podcast now to access the latest episodes.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that. It gets back to, I think, what you're saying before about listening, right? Listening more than you're talking, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you're listening for the things that they're interested in. You're listening, you're observing, you're monitoring, you're paying attention to like what lights them up. There's stuff in every job that we like. Like there are people that like handling the cash. There's some people that don't like handling the cash. There are people that are really great at figuring out your IT issues. And then there's some people that can barely get their way out of a paper bag. I mean, it's just we're all wired differently, and none of it's bad. It's just we're all extremely different. Visionary leaders, they look at the world as a stratosphere, and you're like, can you calm down now for a minute? Because I need to talk to you about something serious. And then you've got your operational people who are extremely firmly grounded, right?
Right.
Like they're only looking at things between 5,000 to 30,000 feet. You just have to figure out how the people are a puzzle. You just have to figure out how can I take everything that they're good at and apply it towards my business. And if you look at them every day that way, you're not going to see them as the checklist isn't being done. They're deficient in this area. You just know that that's not their strong point. Right. And if they're not showing up, reliability is not their strong point. Right. Is a really good example.
So what do you do in that case? I mean, you've hired someone for a job and for a position, a role you want filled, and you're finding out that the reliability is not their standpoint, right? Or maybe in the case of, a print lab, they're not so great on quality control, right? So what do? You
got to figure out what is at the heart of it, right? Because there's a couple of things that you can fix. You can fix the amount of knowledge. So if it's because they need some more training, if they're doing it because they didn't know something, that's an easy fix. Right. You fill that gap. If it's something to where they just don't have the skill set for it, that's easy to fix. It's because they have the gap. If it's anything else other than that, other than those two things, it's because there's something inside of them that they are not connecting to in this business.
And maybe they need to be invited to go, apply their skills elsewhere.
Maybe, but the very first thing is, and this is always the big miss, is that leaders don't set the expectation. Right. They immediately do exactly what you did. Well, maybe this person shouldn't be here. Well, how many times did you set the expectation? How many times did you reinforce it? And in what time frame? Did you do it once when they first started and now we're doing it again 9 months later when it's a day-to-day thing, right? Or is it like, as soon as you see it, it's not being met, let's get them to correct and set the expectations. Like, if you're not doing this, I expect you to course correct. And if you have questions, I'm here, let me know. What do you need to be successful in this area, right? People will look at you like you've got three heads because they're not used to being talked to that way.
Well, I was going to say, wouldn't the response to some of those be, hey, you're micromanaging me, stop hovering?
No, that's what I'm talking about is trust but verify. Micromanaging is when, I'll give you a really good example. I'm on a phone call. I've got a very sensitive issue. I've got my door shut. I'm working my way through this problem. And the president of the company is standing outside of your door reminding you of your meeting that's starting in 5 minutes. And then you don't answer the door, and then they knock again. And you're on the phone for 20 minutes, and they're standing at the door waiting for you to come. That's micromanaging. That does not work, right? But when you see something that's not happening, like if you're telling somebody to do something that they're already doing or they're fixing to do, and they're not given the chance, that's micromanaging. However, if you are addressing the gaps, that's not micromanaging. That's leading.
Because I think a lot of people would be, if you're accusing them of micromanaging, they're not. They're just, no, I'm just providing feedback. Because I always tie like micromanaging almost to the lack of trust.
That is what motivates micromanagement. However, there's also something else that motivates micromanagement, and that's quite frankly the person not doing the job, right? So when you get to a point where somebody's not doing it after being instructed 3 times within a reasonable time period, you have 2 choices. You can either micromanage that person and wind up spending 14% of your annual time dealing with a frontline issue, or you can just say you have a choice right now. And there are times where I've done this and it is extremely effective, but you also have to really know when to play this card. You've had the conversation with somebody, you're on the 4th conversation. If you go beyond 3, this is when the 4th one kicks in. Okay. I need you to help me understand, do you want to be here to do this work? Because if you don't, I'm great if you make that decision right now. But if you decide to stay, here's what I expect. The choice is 100% yours. Go. Like, you tell me what you want to do, because we're only going to do this for 5 more minutes.
Right.
What that person is saying, holy crap, now my welfare is like totally on the line, and now it's up to me. There's a little secret about people. People secretly love power.
Right.
And people will secretly love to not think that you like that power. So when you're giving them a choice, what you're doing is you're giving them power back, but it's a limited amount of power in the scope of it. They have the power to make the decision right then and there on what it is that they want to do.
Right.
That's accountability.
So you're saying people, if properly set up or framed, will actually want to take accountability. They'll like it, but they have to be set up in a proper way, right?
Yes.
You can't just drop it on them and say, boom,
Nope.
here you go. You got to have 3 to 4 steps leading up to it so they know it's coming, so they can kind of see it coming over the hill.
Yeah. I mean, it's a conditioning, it's a learning, right? And this is not what a lot of people are used to in today's environment, but this is exactly what we grew up with.
Right.
You know, and it's still effective today as it was 30, 40, 50, 70, 80, 100 years ago.
So do you think that it's the technology that's changed, or what? Because I mean, like you said, we've all been there. We've all, gone into a retail store or someplace, and the person behind the counter, instead of greeting customers, is scrolling Instagram or doing selfies or something, right? Is it? I'm just curious, because I don't see that going away. Like, smartphones
No, you're
aren't
right.
going to disappear. So
You're right. There's a cultural shift in the world, but let me tell you something. I just got off in December. I was on my very first cruise. There wasn't a person on the cruise ship. You're talking about, our volume was 3,500 people max capacity on the ship that I was on, which means that they need about 1,600 to 1,800 employees. There wasn't a single, not one, not even the guys who come out with a spray bottle, a rag, and they're cleaning the letters on the wall to help you know where you are, right? There wasn't a single person that wasn't willing to help you out, wasn't willing to say hello, was unbelievably friendly, right? Accommodating, joyous. Like, they were happy to be able to meet and at least help you solve your problem, right? Not one. All the way from the captain to the guys that were slinging the lines on the side of the ship. Not one. And I couldn't even tell you how many people I talked to. And my friend that was with me, she kept watching me. It's amazing watching you just like engage with people. I said, I'm curious where they're from. They say they're from Africa. I want to know about it, right? Not a single person. So you can't tell me on a secluded ship with all those people that are on board, when you've got cantankerous customers and people who are drunk and hungover and they just want to be left alone, or they want everything, served to. There's a wide variety of people on a ship. The entire staff holds to the same level of expectation. Doesn't matter if it's a Fortune 500 company or a large company or whatever. That's just on one ship. It's out there.
It can be done.
Those people are out there. I promise.
It can be done.
It absolutely can be done. You spend a week on a cruise ship and you will understand that in 7 days you'll get it, that like there are people that are still out there.
Well, that's cool. So where can people go for more information about Brenda and all the cool things? I mean, have you published the Hey Brenda hotline, or?
Yeah, I know. I should get that URL, shouldn't I? So actually the easiest way to find me, and this is funny because my business partner does this. When he gets on the phone, he says, yo, that's how he says hi. So I came up with yobrenda.com because it's a lot easier than trying to spell my last name. If you go to yobrenda.com, I'm actually going to give you guys something that is going to help, and you can put it to work immediately, right? So when you want more clarity out of your leadership, you want more cohesion, it's going to help you build more confidence. And this is something that I call impact scripts.
Okay.
If you want to start making an impact to your team, making an impact to your day, so you don't feel like, you're jumping through hoops and solving everybody's problems.
Right.
This is going to help you achieve that. Listen more, talk less. It's going to help you achieve ask good questions. You're going to get good answers, especially that one. Okay. And so impact script. So if you go to yobrenda.com, what you're going to do is you're going to put in your name, you're going to put in your email, and it's going to ask you a question. It's going to ask you, what was the one thing that wowed you today? You're going to be able to take the course. It's totally free, 100%. And these are my 3 top phrases that I use all the time. especially when I'm dealing with difficult people. And I'll give you an example of one of them. You ever have that one person that comes in and that's constantly telling you about how bad Bob is and Bob sucks and, Bob's thinking this about you and Bob thinks that you're doing because,
Right.
You make this decision and all of a sudden because Bob, blah, blah. It's like, well, how do you know what's on Bob's mind, right? So now you got a conflict with Bob. One of the things that I have when people who are just so caught up into this thing, I'll ask them, why do you believe that is?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you believe it is that Bob doesn't like you? Why do you believe that Bob is intentionally setting out to make your life a living hell?
Mm-hmm.
Help me understand that, right? That is a great question because what it does is it pulls the person's ego out of the conversation.
Right.
And it requires them to give you information. If it's something because Bob has told me he doesn't like me, Bob is telling me that he doesn't like the smell of my perfume because Bob is telling me that he's, done something stupid to my coffee.
Right.
Now you got something to work with,
Right.
right? But if they keep coming out and saying, well, it's just because this is how he is and this is how he approaches and this is what I'm like, okay, now that's ego because that's somebody trying to interpret something that actually isn't really happening, right?
Right.
Now you know what you're dealing with. You're either dealing with drama or you're dealing with real facts,
Mm-hmm.
right? So let's take your example earlier of the person coming in late, right? Your printer not showing up. The next time they come in is help me understand why you are not coming into work on time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you shut up. And it's amazing because it will force them to answer the question without this ego getting in the way and without all of this cultural shift stuff that's coming in and all of these lame excuses, right? They'll try the lame excuse, but that is a hard conversation for them to beat.
Right. Well, yeah, I've heard the
works.
latest is time blindness, that now people are afflicted with time blindness, right? They can't judge time, so they are always late, right? That's an illness.
Every second grader knows how to read a damn clock these days.
Right.
Every phone has an alarm clock.
Yeah.
I mean, I swear to God, iPhone has replaced Mickey Mouse watches.
Exactly. So everyone needs to go to Brenda that's a Brenda.com to get these 3 powerful statements that people can learn. Well, thank you, Brenda, for your time. It's been great. Thank you for bringing back the memories of Donnie and Marie Osmond and learning more about how to manage people in this very fraught time. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. Read more great stories and sign up for the newsletter at www.thedeadpixelssociety.com.